Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum. I'm your host Faisal Raza and you are watching Foresight. Viewers, as you all know that Pakistan is pleading from decades that India is a state sponsoring terrorism and using terrorism as a tool of its foreign policy time and again. But international community is largely mum on this aspect. Now, after the unfortunate episodes in Canada where two of the Sikh leaders, Hardeep Singh Nijjar and Sukhdev Singh, were heinously murdered this year, and now just recently when Qatar court has sentenced 8 of the former Indian naval officers and 1 sailor sentenced to death because they were spying for Israel on behalf of Indian Raw. Now, the situation is that India is now under the radar of Financial Action Task Force as well. These reviews are going on from the last many years, especially after 2010. And a comprehensive review is going to be happen as it was planned in 2019 but not done because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this month, FATF team is visiting India. Now, the question arises whether India is going to be examined for its sponsorship of terrorism, financing, abetting and facilitation, along with that the money laundering and terror financing across the region and also into the globe. These are the important questions, and to get answers of these questions, we are now having discussion, and for this one, we have in our studios Dr. Waseem Ishaque. He is the international relation expert. Most welcome to you, sir.
Thank you.
Along with him, Ms. Saira Ijaz. She is expert in international relations. Most welcome to you as well. And we have online Brigadier Hamid, Rashid, Malik. He is the foreign affairs expert. So most welcome to you. When we are talking about particularly the Financial Action Task Force, it has a mechanism to review different countries which are involved or they are sponsoring terrorism, particularly when they have any sort of ambiguous financial transactions, when they have some sort of money laundering and all that. So India is suspicious now, and what about this review? So it is important, Doctor, when we are talking about India's position or India's matter related to the Financial Action Task Force, we have seen lots of horrible evidences. Like India is using, or Indian groups or individuals, they are using digital cryptocurrency for terror financing. Along with that, the gold smuggling is the leading way to finance terror across the world. How do you see this aspect?
I think the situation has gone to an extent that now the international community has realized that India is probably one such country which is not only responsible for terrorism inside India, it has overstretched its limits and has gone for international terrorism. So the cross-border terrorism which India used to say against Pakistan for a long time, it is now reversed. Now India is effectively involved in cross-border terrorism, and they have used a specialized mechanism, especially in terms of cryptocurrency, whereby they are using gold and cryptocurrency for terrorist financing. And the most important evidence from the Indian state-sponsored terrorism across the borders, we have seen Indian involvement in Sri Lanka for a long time. We have also seen Indian involvement inside Pakistan. They have been supporting all the splinter groups. TTP is one such example. BLA, BRF, BLU, all such splinter groups inside Balochistan. And we have seen India has been hosting Baramda Booty for a very long time. So all those non-state actors which have remained in destabilizing Pakistan have all the nexus with India. So therefore, India not only materially and financially supports, India has been supporting in terms of logistics, also in terms of training, and also in terms of providing ammunitions, etc. So therefore, India is providing the finances and also the material support for destabilizing the countries. And within South Asia, Pakistan is the biggest victim of Indian state-sponsored terrorism. And I highlighted about Sri Lanka. India was also involved in destabilizing Nepal. And going to the recent example of Canadian national killed in a Canadian soil. This has brought a huge diplomatic row between India and Canada, and we have also seen another Sikh leader who was killed in Britain. So, and the world has now realized, and there are absolutely strong evidences that India is involved. So, this way India has been exposed at the diplomatic level as well as at the financial task force level. So, I visualize that during the recent visit which has been planned during the month of November, they have given a questionnaire of 350 questions. Now, I am sure there will be strong mechanism available for scrutinizing the Indian financial practices as well as Indian involvement into within state and cross-border terrorism.
Dr. Sahab, when, as Dr. Sahab has said, that about 350 questions Financial Action Task Force team is now going to put to the Indian authorities. How do you see it? Because Pakistan was testified for a long period of time. 4 years Pakistan was in grey list, and Pakistan was not a country doing that. Unfortunately, it is because of the Indian politics at the Asia Pacific group and within Fatf as well. So how do you see the Fatf mechanism? Do you think that India is going to be testified, the review will be according to the ground realities, and or the Western hypocrisy will prevail?
The main objective of Fatf is to countermeasure the institutional and legal frameworks jurisdictions follow. And the main another main objective of Fatf is to pinpoint and to follow those member states and those countries who are weak mechanisms, those jurisdictions who do not comply with the international standards to maintain the integrity of international finance system. And when it comes to money laundering and terror financing, the international law is very clear about it, Fatf is very clear about it. And another, recently the current status of India in Fatf is that Fatf gave 7 out of 40 recommendations. Fatf marked India on this position, and out of these 40 recommendations, 10 were totally non-compliant by the India. The status of those recommendations is as under, and the 10 are slightly compliance is by India. So I think India is going to face the heat now. Now the time has come, especially those international events are very important events, killing of an individual. It's another debate that whether a life of a Canadian
Definitely,
is
you are
more
absolutely
important.
right that India is now under the radar and going to face music. But the reality, what would be the reality? Brigadier Sahab, do you think that Financial Action Task Force is going to be serious in tackling this menace which is pouring out from across the world from India?
And in that context, what we have to observe very keenly is either FATF also becomes a ply, or it's able to absorb the pressure of power politics as well as the geopolitical implications and imperatives, and it goes for a very fair as well as fact-based evidence for the terror financing as well as the money laundering. What we have seen in the past, that India has been the main tool of black money as well as the money laundering and financing terror, that is state-sponsored terror on third countries' soil, as already alluded by my colleagues that in Britain as well as in Canada, their nationals has been killed by the Indians. And what Indian intelligence agencies are doing, they are following the footprints of Mossad as well as KGB, and they are killing the people at will, and this clear evidence is available. And the Five Eyes, that is the intelligence agencies of Australia, US, UK and Canada, they have very clearly given the solid evidences that Indian state has been responsible for killing of Canadian national Niger, which was basically a proponent for the freedom of Sikhs, the Khalistan movement. And from that perspective, FATF review is, I think, of utmost importance to dig deep into the terror financing by the India.
So there are ample reports, Brigadier Sahab, that lots of Indian groups who are closely in touch with Bharatiya Janata Party, that is now a ruling party. Along with that, the extremist groups like Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, Vishwa Hindu Parishad and Bajrang Dal and all others, those groups are financing not only these groups but also they are involved in gold smuggling in the name of religion, because lots of Hindu temples and all others across the world, they are building or they are using this gold for their purposes. So then it is converted into an illegal money and used for terror financing. How do you see this aspect? Because they are hiding this gold into the different temples, and those are not liable to raid or to have investigation.
We do have respect for every religion, but the hard fact of life is that these temples
unfortunate, really,
converted into gold mines, as well as these has become hub of terrorism. Under the name of Hindutva and Akhand Bharat, the fanatics, they are killing their fellow countrymen also. See the fate of the Muslims, they are being killed just for eating cow or butchering cow. This is no excuse at all for killing another human being. And if we see the life of Christian, it is also worst in India. And you have very rightly highlighted that the fanatic organization in India, they are being financed by the state. Now the BJP government or the Modi government, they are basically providing them all the resources so that they go and clean up and going for the genocide. Just 2 days before, there was the 10th anniversary, the 6th genocide in 1984, which actually is eye-opener for not only the human rights experts across the globe, but for the neighbors also. And Dr. Waseem has very, I think, appropriately highlighted that the neighbors are feeling the brunt of now Hindutva as well as the violent mindset of the Modi government.
Okay. Dr. Waseem Sahib, when we are talking about Indian hegemonic designs, or do you think that India is, it is a larger perception that India is using state-sponsored terrorism or terrorism as a tool of its foreign policy, along with that might be the instrument of regional or global hegemony? How do you agree with it?
I think there is absolutely no doubt. We have strong evidences that Indian foreign policy has now been highly underpinned by its statecraft in terms of terrorism. For instance, when India first time intervened in Sri Lankan crisis, and for a good about 30 years they remain entangled into that, that had shown the Indian foreign policy of expansionism. And as we have now progressed for another 30 years, we have seen that India is now saying Bharat means the bigger South Asian, pre-South Asian partition context. So India is now interfering in all the South Asian countries, and we have seen the Maldives election just recently held. There is a standoff between Maldives new government and the India. So India is interfering with Nepal
because of the Indian forces presence within Maldives.
And their not very friendly posture towards India. So India, in all the South Asian countries, if we see, is
because of the Indian interference into the Maldives internal affairs,
especially during the elections as well.
Yes.
So India is, as a summary, is involved in internal affairs of Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, Pakistan, and negatively using Afghanistan and the incumbent government of Afghanistan against the neighboring country of, for example, Pakistan, using its soil through their proxies.
So when we are talking about, you are rightly pointed out about the Indian proxies particularly. So India, Saira, India is actually, it is again a larger perception that India is using its lobbies across the world. They are pumping in billions of dollars, like in Disinfo Lab, using fake news and all others to influence most of the states, most of the people across the world. So how do you see this aspect? Do you think that those lobbies, those disinformation, fake news will not affect the Fatf review?
It will. I would like to add another aspect to it. We all are discussing the external role or external portion of India's involvement in terrorist activities, money laundering, and
but this is what India is doing internally and externally both.
I'm just coming to it. Recently, Rahul Gandhi, the prominent Congress leader, and the other prominent opponent leaders like Shashi Tharoor, Priyanka Chaturvedi, they all claimed this thing that they are receiving threatening messages, and when they have contacted the Apple company or iPhone company, so they have reached to the point that it is state-sponsored spying. State-sponsored spying, and they have provided the evidences to the state and to the company as well, and the company has agreed to look into this matter. And you know what, in 2021, I guess these all are linked. When we connect the dots, we come to this point that in the entire facade India has been making so far under the government of BJP and Narendra Modi, that India is great and the shining and the bright India, is that the use of Pegasus spying software.
It is because of the India-Israel nexus as well.
Nexus as well, which they need to surveil political opponents, activists and journalists. So India and the current regime is not targeting only the neighbors, only the outside world. They are also inflicting all these things, and when you don't have such sport within, they have their own voice. Over there, the opposition is very strong. People and the international media listens to Rahul Gandhi and the other Congress leaders, and definitely all these things will negatively affect, and Fatf will look into
Definitely,
these matters.
and your point well taken, Dr. Sahab. Pakistan was pleading across the world that India is a state which is sponsoring terrorism, not only sponsoring but also financing, facilitating, abetting and all that, and even imparting training to all those terror outfits, as you have rightly mentioned about. So what about those dossiers which Pakistan has presented and not only given to the international capitals but also to the United Nations as well? So there is a very minimum action or even no statement from the international community or even from the United Nations. So how do you see that aspect?
I think we have to actually keep in mind the geopolitics of a particular time. So we have seen last 20 years through the national security strategy of 2017 of President Trump, they had given a special status to India, and they said that we welcome the rise of India and giving a special role in the Indo-Pacific. And subsequently, India is, from the US perspective, India is a very important member of Indo-Pacific Quadrilateral Alliance, and overall
just because of the containment of China policy.
Because of the containment of China. So that is the enhanced relevance of India. Because of that factor, and while in the same national security strategy, they have been using a very rough language against Pakistan.
Which is unfortunate.
So in that context, the relevance of India since then internationally, especially with the United States and being part of the US military alliances against China, because of those factors, the international community had been ignoring all our dossiers which we have provided. While we have seen that Kulbhushan Yadav is still in our custody, the world was not ready to listen to that. But now, since the India has expanded its terrorism footprints inside Canada and inside Britain, and we have seen in Qatar as well. So now this is about time that the international community should have realized by now that other than Pakistan, there are many other countries which have suffered because of India. And I think November month is just the right time when FATF is supposed to arrive, and we have seen the events of last 2 months, India's international terrorism. So therefore, I am sure that India is likely to have a very tough time during FATF inspections and scrutiny, and let's hope and pray that international community should not regard Indian geopolitical affiliation with the West, and they should be dispassionate for the safety and for that so-called rule-based international order to make sure that their checking and scrutiny is disproportionate this time.
Definitely, you are rightly said that Indian international terrorism, but international analysts, they are describing it as a global terrorism from India. And Brigadier Sahab, to you, how particularly when we are talking about India's intentions to be a hegemon in the region and support from the Western countries, do you think that soon after these episodes, what Dr. Sahab has just rightly pointed out about Canada, Britain, Qatar and lots of other countries, do you think the West is serious in taking action against India, although they are all the members of Financial Action Task Force as well? How they are going to take India to account?
we need to first understand that India's hegemonic design are based on Chankya's thought, which said that there are no borders between the neighbors, and the interests are basically can take over precedence over morality over everything. And this a mindset basically, if we see that the Indian strategists, they think that India is an elephant and others mouse around must pay respect to the big, and big is beautiful. Now, just see how absurd this thought is, that instead of being more responsible, the world's biggest democracy, and its face has been speared by the Moody's violent thought process and with the human rights violations, not only in Kashmir, not around the globe. These see, let's Faisal see how many separatist movements are there in India. The northeastern states.
You're absolutely right. Yes.
And then the gang rape of the women, the lynching of the Muslims, then skinning of the Muslims and burning of the Christians. They have basically made India a hell for non-Hindus and non-fanatics. And I think with passage of time, the world is going to realize that this democracy has a very absurd face for the globe, and it is becoming a threat for not only for the neighbors, for the globe also.
So, Brigadier Sahib, India, it is astonishing that the reports which are coming from India are that there are lots of cryptocurrency exchanges, cryptocurrency ATMs are there in India, which are frequently used for terror financing and money laundering. And there is another mechanism in Singapore as well. Some of the reports suggest that billions of dollars were extracted from those mechanisms from Singapore as well. So, India is using international financial system for its own purposes and illegally. How do you see that illegal, illegitimate purposes and ways to finance such illegitimate activities across the world?
During the global war against terrorism, financing of terrorists was one of the key points on which world got together, and FATF also has a charter which basically is not money laundering, but basically they roam on about the financing of the terrorists. And you have very correctly highlighted that basically the cryptocurrency is being used as a shadow economy and as siphoning of the money from one source to the other. And these ATM within the India, these are basically for the goons and for the fanatics, Hindus, those who are attacking either the Muslims or the Christians or Sikhs even. And as far as Singapore network, and I will not be surprised if apart from Singapore, other countries, they also have such money exchanges available, and cryptocurrency is now being used. And I think it will be a real test for FATF and for the world also, that they should go for the facts-based review, and they should not compromise on the power politics or for going for the containment of China gimmick, and they should come out with the facts. And like Pakistan has faced the brunt of 29 points, and just see the number of 350 points. And Saira also very correctly highlighted that there are few points which were left unattended for the past review. Those should form now the basis of the fact and evidence on which India should be put into the grey list or into the black list, I would say.
Definitely, you are absolutely right. And when we are talking about, as Brigadier Sahib said, that 350 questions, and these 350 questions in which largely the queries are about the gold smuggling, cryptocurrency, as well as they are asking about, because reports suggest that some of the Bollywood dons, they were also involved in that, because the overall money revolving, circulating through the film industry of India is easy to smuggle, is easy to just drain it out to the different countries, to use it for their own purposes, for illegitimate activities. So, how do you see this aspect?
I think the biggest sources available for India for the terrorist financing is the informal sort of economy. It is not the mainstream economy through banking channels through which the international financial system actually has a lot of monitoring systems.
Because largely the groups and individuals are involved in that.
Yes. And other than that, other than the cryptocurrency, my research indicates that a lot of money people physically take and take it to the other countries from where then they have to different hubs from where then they support those terrorist organizations. So, India is highly dependent on that informal set of economy, but I am sure as these reports are highlighted in the media, so will be the at least one odd question may be added by FATF through these media reports, that what is the system of their informal economy or the gold reserves and which is being circulated later on, and also the Bitcoin, etc. So, I am sure the FATF, because all these things are already highlighted in the media, so they should be taking care of it. But I am afraid from one thing, that since all these FATF organizations have also been working as per the relevance of the international order and the big powers. So, from that context, all those things which India is doing and they are empirically proved through different sources, the one thing which can still give a sort of liberty to India is their international relevance at this point in time. However, it is a real test of this FATF organization by themselves, that whether they should be going for that international relevance or they should be going to do the work which they are actually mandated.
So, Saira, you are very well aware of that India, in India particularly, there are lots of digital platforms, internet websites, and lots of international, like Google has its office there. They have the Twitter and all other, and even the international organizations, lots of Indians are there. So, how do you see this aspect, because India is using social media for spreading terrorism, extremism and all other things, and to gain its objectives through these means by sponsoring it. So, even the finances generated through the social media, they are also used for different purposes. So, how do you see this aspect of Indian state?
There is no doubt that IT industry is very strong in India, let us accept it, and they are using it for their own interests. Now, let us see the current CEO of Google.
Interest is something else, but subversive activities are something else. I think so it is 180-degree away from each other.
Definitely, they call it their interests, maybe, and I am just talking from that perspective.
Okay.
Definitely. Now there are many NRIs, there are many Indian origin people on important positions in world organizations. As I mentioned, the CEO of Google is right now an Indian. Ambani family has quite, influence in global institutions. But it again really doesn't give license to India to, to terror financing and to money laundering and all that. And another aspect is of, as we already have discussed, about the role of Bollywood, because it's very easy to justify that black money. It's a very, bright and shining way to, convert your black money into white money.
And world largely accepted as well.
Has crossed 100 crores and the 200 crores. I always imagine, they don't, sometimes. So, but again, the role of FATF comes because its main role is to point out the strategic deficiencies in the jurisdictions and their regimes. And I am quite hopeful that FATF, to maintain its own position because it's a global standard setter, it has to, counter, and it has to point out to India to, to address its strategic deficiencies.
Definitely.
So, I think there are lots of strategic deficiencies which are now, coming out with every passing event, and 2023 is really not a very good year for India, because at times you can cover your black things, but at one point things have to be,
Your point well taken, Saira. Brigadier Sahib, as Saira said, that there are lots of deficiency within the Indian system from where this whole pilferage is going on, but do you think these are the deficiencies, or intentionally India is doing at the state level?
I would like to agree with my colleague Saira, because these deficiencies are, we can say, shortcomings. While on one hand, Modi government is trying to give rise to Hindutva, give rise to Hindu supremacy, but at the same time, they should realize that is a multi-ethnic society in India. And apart from multi-ethnic society in India, they should also realize the caste system in the Indian society among the Hindu religion. These two facts basically are a problem for the Indians. They can't cope up. And then the world has become a global village. As you said that the social media, on one point, social media provides India a platform that it can influence the globe around and the people around, and it can have its own lobbying for its own interest. But on the other side, on the contrary, what we see that its neighbors' problems, its neighbors' hegemonic, which they are experienced from India, also comes to the light. Just see the plight of the Nepal. What people say around in the world, it is not land-locked, it is India-locked country. Bhutan, its royal family was butchered by the Indians. Then Dr. Waseem has very appropriately talked about Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Pakistan. And
Even
now Qatar
Bangladesh.
and Canada, Britain, they are all facing brunt of that Hindutva mindset or belligerent attitude of the Modi government. And I think these deficiencies are not actually their internal, but because of their hegemonic and belligerent policies world around, they are not giving peace to prevail in the region. They are not giving any chance to their neighbors for regional connectivity, regional cooperations. And I would say these are not actually their deficiencies. It is their dark side of their soul that they don't want to live happily with their neighbors.
So what about fueling the proxies across the region, particularly from the third country inflicting terrorism upon other countries like Pakistan, and also this nuclear fissile material illegal trade which is going on in India, and lots of people apprehended and lots of material confiscated within India regarding this nuclear black market?
Faisal, I think a very prominent point highlighted by you, and this is actually again shows double standard of the world. Just see Iraq, it was attacked just on the rumors of weapons of mass destruction, and here the evidence is that the Indian nationals were really involved in the smuggling of nuclear fissile material, and no action taken by the world. Maybe, as Dr. Waseem highlighted, it is the international relation they want with the India and use it for the containment of China. But I think now it will become a gimmick and people will realize that India is becoming a source of instability for the region and for the world. And the world will reckon with the facts that the peaceful coexistence is the only principle for the future.
Brigadier Sahib, thank you. Dr. Sahib, when we are talking about India, India is an ally, as you have rightly mentioned, when we are going through the US Indo-Pacific policy. So, India is an ally to the United States, and Canada has lots of apprehensions. They have the diplomatic row with each other now, especially after the heinous murders. Britain has lots of apprehensions. So, do you think that these world powers are going to take considerable action against India in this regard, particularly through Fatf, because you know that the international politics, when it prevails, Fatf is also the part of it?
Yes, I think so. As I mentioned earlier also, that the world has now realized the true face of India. There was a time when we were just hearing shining India and rising India and unity in diversity, and today Modi has changed this India to a large extent. Now it is highly extremist India from within and a state sponsoring terrorism for outside. So therefore, both Britain and Canada have suffered the Indian state sponsored terrorism. The regional countries have suffered the Indian state sponsored terrorism, and I am sure now all the regional countries together with the world powers like Britain and Canada, they have raised voices against India. So would be the now FATF taking note of it, and I am sure the United States policy makers should also be mindful of whatever has happened in last 2 to 3 months. So therefore, it is right time that the world has now realized and seen the true face of India, and the time of accountability has probably come. However, the process may be a little slow, but surely it is going to happen as per my analysis.
Saira, when we are talking about India's this unfortunate terror financing and money laundering and all that, so how do you see illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, because lots of human rights violations, genocide going on, there are crimes against humanity and lots of other things, and this Israel-India nexus is also playing when we are talking about, because these money laundering and terror financing is a huge aspect when we are talking about the sponsoring terrorism at the state level.
Actually, the recent unfortunate and very heart-wrenching Israel and the Palestinian conflict, now it's a full-fledged war, is, unveil the similarity between Israel and India. They both are doing the same thing. Unfortunately, both the oppressors are Muslims. That's another aspect, but yes, actually, it's a very strange game of politics. It comes to the military interests, it comes to the strategic interests, which so far, particularly in Trump administration, they gave lots and lots of importance to India when it comes to Asia Pacific strategy. So it gives, and the G20 summit and such international events, it gave the India that confidence that, like Israel, that they as if they have the license to do whatever they want to do. But I'm telling you that time is coming whether the things are really going to against India in a way, because when you don't understand the the trend, you cannot oppress the people, you cannot against their will, you cannot take their land against their
even
will.
if you are using terrorism as a tool, it is not going to be the success
not going
really.
in the long
Definitely.
run.
And Brigadier Sahib, one important thing, if you just go through briefly into that, Financial Action Task Force team is now going to arrive in India, and they have a comprehensive review whatever India is doing at the state level, individual level, or a group level, or the proxy level regarding terror financing or money laundering. So do you think that there are any aspects would be examined in clear terms, and the report which is going to be submitted next year into the plenary would be comprehensive one, and Fatf is going to take concrete actions against India?
Faisal, if we see the charter of FATF and their mandate as well as their working style, they go and they just have review of the all inflow, outflow of coming finances into the economy. And I think India by itself accepted in 2016 when they went for abolishing 500 Ps and 1000 Ps note, because they realized the black economy, and also Modi wanted that the economy should be put right and all transactions should be made recordable. But still, there are many loopholes, and FATF needs to be reckoned with that. And if they go for, I think, a fact-based review, many things will be clear to them. And as the media is also highlighting, that there are many terror groups which are being state-sponsored. So facts are there. They just have to compile. And as you said about the plenary committee's report, and I think the countries around, if they don't fudge to the international pressure and pressure of USA, and I think with the Canadians nationals' death where US, they cooperated with the Canadian intelligence agencies, I think there is some change of mindset around the globe also. And this FATF report will be, I think, a test case for the world as well as for the USA.
Thank you very much, Brigadier Sir, Brigadier Hamid, Rashid, Malik, for joining us online. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you very much, Dr. Waseem, for joining us here in studios. Thank you very much, Saira. Viewers, we all know, and there are lots of now questions arises that it is after the series of events this year, particularly in Britain, in Canada, and in Qatar. Now, question is that whether Financial Action Task Force will examine India in real ground terms, and particularly this terror financing and the money laundering which is going on from India across the world to support, facilitate, abet and finance the terrorist activities through its proxies across the world. And or again a question that or the Western hypocrisy will prevail for their meager interests in the region. So this is today's Foresight. It is time to sign off. Allah Hafiz wa Nasir.